Right now, in a stretch of the Pacific Ocean most people will never see on a map, the water is heating up in a way it hasn't in almost 150 years. Scientists have a name for what's forming there: El Niño. And this time, they're not using their normal, careful, hedged language. They're calling it a super El Niño, possibly the strongest ever recorded. So why does warm water thousands of miles away have the power to starve entire nations? The answer starts with something almost embarrassingly simple and ends somewhere far darker than most headlines are willing to go. Let's start with the mechanism, because almost nobody explains this part. Normally, trade winds blow steadily from east to west across the Pacific, from South America toward Indonesia. Those winds drag warm surface water with them, piling it up in the western Pacific, while cooler water rises up to replace it near South America. This isn't random. It's a self-sustaining loop. Warm water heats the air above it. That air rises, pressure drops, clouds build. Cold water does the opposite. Air sinks, pressure rises. Wind flows from high pressure to low pressure, which strengthens the very winds driving the whole cycle. No engine, no external force, just a temperature difference running itself. El Niño happens when that loop weakens. The trade winds ease off. Warm water that would normally sit in the west starts drifting back east. The cold upwelling near South America shuts down, and the entire rainfall pattern the planet has relied on for thousands of years shifts to somewhere else entirely. Clouds that used to form over Indonesia and Australia now form in the middle of the Pacific instead. That single shift is enough to rewire monsoons, droughts, and floods on nearly every continent at once. By July of this year, sea surface temperatures in the key monitoring zone were already 2 degrees above average. Some forecasts now suggest that number could climb past 3, maybe even 4 degrees. If it does, meteorologists say this could become the El Niño of the millennium. The last time the world saw anything close to this scale was 1877. And 1877 is the year that should actually terrify you, because it's not a weather statistic, it's a body count. In 1877, the strongest El Niño event in recorded history collided with an already fragile world, and an estimated 50 million people died, not from the ocean itself, but from what the ocean triggered next: failed monsoons, collapsed harvests, villages emptied out, wells run dry, families surviving for months on nothing while the land around them turned to dust. It was one of the first famines in human history to be documented by camera. And now, almost exactly 150 years later, headlines are once again reaching for that same number, warning that a super El Niño is bearing down on a hungry world. But here's where the story most people are being told falls apart. If El Niño alone caused catastrophe, then 1997 should have been a disaster too. That year brought the strongest El Niño of the 20th century. Scientists worldwide were on alert. The United Nations was briefed. Famine scenarios were already being drafted for India, and then the monsoon arrived almost exactly on schedule, with slightly above average rainfall. The century's biggest El Niño barely left a mark. Then flip it. In 2002, there was no warning, no dramatic headlines, nobody expecting anything unusual. That year's El Niño was so weak that most forecasters barely flagged it. And that was the year India suffered its worst drought in a decade. A weak El Niño triggered a disaster that a record-breaking one hadn't. So what does the size of an El Niño actually tell you? On its own, almost nothing. The real story is what scientists sometimes call a disaster domino chain, a sequence of blocks that all have to fall in the same direction for catastrophe to happen. El Niño is just the first block, and often the smallest one. The second block sits in the Indian Ocean itself, a separate temperature seesaw called the Indian Ocean dipole. When the western side warms up, it pulls moisture-heavy winds towards South Asia, reinforcing the monsoon almost regardless of what the Pacific is doing. In 1997, that dipole was strongly positive, which is the real reason the harvest survived a record El Niño. In 2002, it was firmly negative, with nothing to counter the weak El Niño at all. That's the block nobody puts in a headline. The third block is baseline vulnerability, how fragile a population already is before the disaster even arrives. In 1877, nearly 88% of farmland depended entirely on rainfall, with no irrigation, no backup. There was no early warning system, no forecasting, zero preparation. 2 years of drought had already stripped wells and grain stores bare before El Niño ever hit. It wasn't one bad year that killed millions. It was one bad year landing on top of a system with no cushion left. And then there's the fourth block, the one historians rarely put in the same sentence as weather. During that same 1877 famine, while an estimated crore of people were dying from starvation, British colonial administrators were exporting record tonnage of wheat out of the country, food that could have fed the starving, moving toward ports instead of villages. Some relief was offered, but only to those willing to break stones or dig earth first, for a ration smaller than what a prisoner in a 20th century concentration camp would later receive. Nature pulled the trigger. Policy loaded the gun. So what's actually different in 2026? A lot, and it matters. Early warning systems exist now, specifically because of 1877 and 1876, born directly out of that catastrophe. Governments today can identify vulnerable districts months in advance and pre-position resources before a single crop fails. Irrigation now reaches roughly half of farmland that once depended purely on rainfall, cutting direct exposure to a bad monsoon almost in half. Grain reserves sit several times higher than official emergency buffers require. None of that existed in any form 150 years ago, but none of it makes the danger disappear. It just moves where the danger shows up. Climate scientists tracking this El Niño say the real difference this time isn't the ocean pattern itself. It's the backdrop it's forming against. Global temperatures have already climbed roughly 1.5 degrees since pre-industrial times. Layer a super El Niño on top of that baseline, and some forecasts suggest the combined effect could push warming toward 1.7 or even 1.8 degrees, at least temporarily. Every additional degree lets the atmosphere hold roughly 7% more moisture, which means the floods this El Niño triggers won't just be floods, they'll be the kind of floods a cooler world never produced. And the droughts won't just be dry spells, they'll pull moisture out of parched ground even faster than before.